In the 1980s, while the world was gripped by the Cold War drama playing out between Washington and Moscow, a very different kind of war was being fought. This was a war fought in the shadows, a war not declared in Congress, and certainly not shown on your nightly news. It was a war secretly funded, trained, and orchestrated by the CIA. This is the incredible story of America's secret war in Nicaragua, a conflict that exposed the darkest corners of U.S. foreign policy and nearly brought down a presidency. To truly understand the CIA's secret war, we have to rewind the clock to 1979. For decades, Nicaragua had been suffocating under the brutal Somoza dictatorship, a regime propped up by the United States and infamous for its corruption and violence. Finally, the Nicaraguan people had enough. A revolution, led by a leftist guerrilla group known as the Sandinista National Liberation Front, or FSLN, swept the nation. They successfully overthrew Anastasio Somoza, ending more than 40 years of his family's oppressive rule. For millions of Nicaraguans, it was a moment of pure liberation, a real chance for change, equality, and a hopeful future. But back in Washington, the mood was far from celebratory. The new Sandinista government had connections to Cuba and the Soviet Union. In the black and white world of Cold War politics, that meant only one thing: communism was spreading in America's own backyard. This was a red line for many in the U.S. government. By 1981, Ronald Reagan was in the Oval Office, and he was absolutely determined to stop what he called a Marxist beachhead in Central America. And so, the CIA got to work. They quietly began recruiting, training, and arming a counter-revolutionary force. This group was a mixed bag, made up mostly of former members of Somoza's National Guard, disillusioned peasants, and anti-Sandinista fighters. They were given a name: the Contras. Publicly, the U.S. government portrayed them as freedom fighters, brave warriors battling for democracy. But the reality on the ground was far grimmer. The Contras were waging a brutal guerrilla war, targeting schools, hospitals, and critical infrastructure in a relentless campaign to destabilize the Sandinista government. The CIA even produced a shocking training manual for the Contras, teaching them everything from how to sabotage bridges to how to assassinate local leaders, an act that would later be condemned by Congress. But not everyone in Washington was on board with this shadow war. As horrifying reports of Contra atrocities started to surface, stories of mass killings, torture, and kidnappings, Congress decided to act. In 1982, lawmakers passed the Boland Amendment. This law made it illegal for the CIA or any other U.S. government agency to provide military aid to the Contras. Officially, the war was supposed to be over, but secretly, it had only just begun. What happened next would unravel into one of the most shocking political scandals in American history. The Reagan administration was desperate to keep the Contras fighting their secret war. So, a covert network deep inside the National Security Council, led by a Marine colonel named Oliver North, concocted a bold and illegal plan. They would secretly sell weapons to Iran, a country that was, at the time, under a strict arms embargo and considered a state sponsor of terrorism. Then, they would take the profits from those illegal arms sales and funnel the money to the Contras in Nicaragua. It was illegal, it was unethical, and it was incredibly risky. But for a while, it actually worked. The scheme continued in the shadows until 1986, when a U.S. cargo plane packed with supplies for the Contras was shot down over Nicaragua. One American crew member survived, was captured, and the secret was suddenly out. The Iran-Contra Affair, as it came to be known, exploded across the American media. Congressional hearings were broadcast live, captivating the nation. President Reagan famously claimed he had no knowledge of the operation, while several of his top aides faced criminal charges. Oliver North, the architect of the plan, became a strangely polarizing figure, a villain to some, a patriotic hero to others. The scandal laid bare the deep, troubling contradictions of U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War. It forced America to ask itself, how far were we willing to go to fight communism? And who gets to decide what's right in a war that isn't even supposed to exist? By the early 1990s, the brutal Contra War had left a devastating legacy. Tens of thousands of people were dead, the Nicaraguan economy was in ruins, and the country was left deeply fractured and divided. The Sandinistas, worn down by years of war and economic pressure, eventually lost the presidential election in 1990. Not by bullets, but by ballots. The CIA's secret war was finally over. But its shadow never truly disappeared. In the decades that followed, declassified documents slowly revealed the full, astonishing scale of the CIA's covert operations. We learned about sophisticated psychological warfare campaigns, the spread of black propaganda, and clandestine funding networks that stretched across the entire globe. For many, the story of the Contras became a powerful reminder that the Cold War wasn't just a superpower standoff fought in Berlin or Moscow. It was also fought in the dense, unforgiving jungles of Central America, where the line between defending democracy and destroying it became dangerously, terrifyingly thin. This was the CIA's secret war in Nicaragua, a hidden chapter of history with lessons that still resonate today. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more untold stories from the hidden corners of history coming your way. Thanks for watching.